Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm going to jump us right in because I know time is short. But just so I know, did you rewatch the movie recently?
Last night, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Hello and welcome back to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today I have Jessica Plummer, one of my favorite returning guests, and I get to ask her a question that I have not asked her before. And I get to ask her one of the most important questions in cinematic history. Jessica, what's with today?
Excellent question.
As you can probably tell, today we are talking about the movie Empire Records, which excuse me, which to my younger audience, some of you may never have heard of, in which case, please sue your families right now. Your parents have failed you. It is an utter cult classic, a beloved movie, a favorite of sleepover parties and things like that everywhere, particularly to older millennials and younger Gen X's, which I think Jessica and I together fall into. It's 30 years old, and it's a favorite of both of ours, and it was one that we wanted to go back and take a look at again. I think I saw something on like TikTok about it that got me thinking about it, that made me want to rewatch it. And then I said, Jessica, you must be a fan of this movie. Let's talk about it. And it's really a kind of a genre that doesn't exist anymore. So I don't even know how to fit it into our modern conversation. But there's definitely some fun ethical questions that are raised both within the movie itself and about the production of it and why it is we don't see movies like this these days anyway. So, Jessica, say hello. And for those who haven't, like, how would you describe Empire Records to someone who hasn't seen it before?
I guess it's a teen comedy, I think is the best way to describe it. But it's very slice of life. It's like 24 hours in the life of an independent record store in some unnamed town where everybody is very, very cool.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because, like, on the one hand, I want to call it a rom-com, and there is kind of a romance at the center of it. Sorry. And it's funny because I kind of want to call it a rom-com, and there are some rom-com elements to it, but it is much more of an ensemble piece. It's really a piece, like you said, it's a slice of life. There's an ensemble of weird teen characters, and they're kind of older. The record store manager, who's kind of a adoptive uncle to all of them, and the romance is a little bit at the center, but there's so much else going on in the heart of this movie. And why is it like? What are the elements that you think that we have that we just don't see in movies these days?
I mean, I think a big part of it is I'm going to say small budget, although I was looking at Wikipedia last night to prepare for this episode. And I mean, it's relatively small budget, but I think it cost like $10 million to make, but it made like $12 at the box office. It was such a flop. Like, I've never seen numbers like that. But it really, like, that relatively low budget, small scale, like it feels very indie. It feels very, I don't know, homemade, which of course was like a very popular aesthetic, I guess, of the early to mid 90s, really. It's almost the cast is pretty much entirely unknowns at the time. I mean, some of them have gone on to be famous. Liv Tyler is in it. Ethan Embry, Renee Zellweger, all obviously went on to have very, successful careers in the 90s and 2000s. But at the time, this was like very early career for all of them. And most of the others are like, they didn't make a lot of other movies I've seen.
Yeah, I think I took a look at a bunch of their cast bios, and some of them have been in things, but it's kind of a weird break between, those top three who you mentioned, especially Liv Tyler and Renee Zellweger, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, something bad cut my throat. And in many ways, I think this movie really helped launch both of their careers. Liv Tyler, of course, had already gotten famous for the Aerosmith videos she was in. But this was, I think, one of her first real mainstream movies that she was in. And I think this was Renee Zellweger's first big part as well. She'd been in a couple of other things. To frame it, so as you said, it is about the story of a record store on the day when there's a crisis, you know, and like this could this could have easily been the season finale episode of a show today about this group of kids, but it somehow manages to introduce all of them and make you care about all of them in a pretty tight, like I think hour 40 minutes movie or something like that.
Just hour and a half. It's short.
Yeah. The overarching theme is that the manager, Joe, wants to keep this store independent, but they're having money problems. And the owner wants to sell to Record Town, which is the insert big corporate record store that will put all of the teeny bopper greatest hit. That will put all of the like top 40 hits and get rid of all of the like quirky, fun music stuff that's happening in an independent place. Luke, who is it's a very small plot point that it's talked about, but he basically was a foster kid. His parents treated him really badly, and he was adopted by Joe, the guy who's the manager of the store. And he kind of works with the store, but also is kind of a he's the one who has the most clear family relationship to Joe, although really they all do in some way. But he figures out that Joe is in money problems, that the store might become this terrible thing, and so he's closing for the first time that night, and closing means he gets all the money together from all the registers and stuff like that. And they're somewhere, I believe, in New Jersey or in Pennsylvania, because they're close enough that he can drive to Atlantic City that night. I think they actually did show it's somewhere in like northern New Jersey. But he drives to Atlantic City. I'm sorry. He drives to Atlantic City, utterly convinced that he's going to, you know, the music gods are going to bless his endeavor. He puts all the money down on craps, wins, puts it all down again, convinced that he's going to have enough money to save the store and everything will go great. And of course he loses it. And so the main kind of story is what's going to happen with that, what's going to happen with Lucas. Meanwhile, among the many teenagers and young adults who are at the store, Liv Tyler is playing the kind of romantic lead. The teeny bopper guy she utterly loves, this guy named Rex Manning, is coming to the store to do a record signing because oh Rexy, you're so sexy, a line that many people will remember. And she has decided she's going to give her virginity to this man. While meanwhile, another guy at the store secretly loves her, AJ, and wants to be with her. Her best friend is a much more adventurous young lady who is always teasing her about not being as sexually active as she is. And of course, she gets into her own hijinks. And it's kind of like, when I say this, it sounds like we should need like a 10 episode season. There's also the kind of goth stand-in who has self-harmed recently and is being challenged by this idea of maybe she wants to end her life and she's not sure. There's so much going on in this store. That was a throw it to you, but I can make this more specific.
Oh, and there's also Mark, the lovable stoner comic relief, and then two other guys who don't need to be in the movie and don't do anything, because there's also Eddie and Burko, the useless employees who they could have cut those parts.
One of them has to be in the movie because he writes the song that Renée Zellweger gets to sing, because her character plot is that she never actually tries to do what she wants, and therefore gets to challenge that and of course have her resolution on the roof of the store.
Yeah, but I was thinking about that, and Mark at one point says he wants to start a band. They could have just had him already have a band.
That's true. That's
like
true.
It could, like those two guys, they're just also there.
They're definitely there. Yeah, I mean, it feels like there's a lot that got left on the cutting room floor, because one of them is sort of the ex-boyfriend of the goth girl, and apparently like something bad happened with them, and it isn't really explained. Not that he's the reason why she's upset, but that he's not able to help her. And yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on in this record store.
There's a lot going on, and the movie will very frequently stop the plot in its tracks to do an extended gag or have a little bit of a musical interlude, or just have like weird shots of like weird stuff in the store. There's also, there's a shoplifter. There's this like 14-year-old kid who comes in and shoplifts and then sort of gets folded into the group. There's a lot happening, and I can see. It's going to sound insulting when I say I can see why it bombed, or rather, I can see why it was. All the critics hated it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you watch this and you're 14 and you want to be these kids, then it's a perfect movie. And if you're an adult, you're like, is anybody going to ring up the customers or like
Yeah.
do anything?
Yeah. There's part of how they do the musical montage is the idea that each of the workers gets to pick what album is on at certain moments. And there are some just fantastic musical montages and great moments, and a lot about Two Strong Pot Brownies and how that can affect your watching of a Guar video. But yeah, we've talked about a lot of reasons why people might not like this movie. Why do you think so many people loved it? Why was it so beloved?
I mean, I think a big part of it is just the coolness factor. Like, these are the coolest kids you've ever seen in your life, especially like you said earlier, this movie particularly appeals to young Gen X and elder millennials, which is our sort of overlap. And I am just old enough to remember looking up to teens exactly like this. I think maybe a few years younger than me, I'm not saying that, someone who was born in 1990 instead of 1984 wouldn't appreciate the movie at all, but it wouldn't have that really strong nostalgia element as well.
Right.
And the screenplay is extremely witty. Like, it's just a really sharp, funny screenplay. But at the same time, even though they are unrealistically cool and unrealistically funny, they're really relatably teenage. They're like, not always, but a lot of the time. There's the bit you were describing, like all the interpersonal drama. And when I was rewatching it, I was really struck both by the scene after Corey, Liv Tyler's character, has decided to lose her virginity to Rex Manning and then changes her mind. And she's like kind of having a panic attack about it. And AJ decides this is the perfect moment to tell her that he's in love with her. And she does not handle it well. And he does not handle the rejection well. And they have a big fight and they're both like basically flouncing around, unable to cope. Or the bit where she gets into a huge screaming fight with Renee Zellweger's character, Gina, and they're both having these massive meltdowns and sobbing hysterically. And Joe, the manager, is just standing there like,
I don't know what to do. Yeah.
But like, they feel so real, just with way better hair than you or anybody you will ever meet has.
Yeah, it was really interesting how it sort of is the movie for everybody, because if you think back to what high school was like those days, either because you know it or because you watched My So-Called Life, they really get like all the different kind of like groups that we had are represented in this movie. There is the daddy's girl, like super driven. I have to get into Harvard or nothing else will be okay. I have to be the top. I have to be the head of everything. There's the person who is, coming from a pretty bad family background, and her mother has never really done much with her life, and she's figuring out what it means to be a sexual person without it, like, and kind of letting herself be defined by that because she doesn't really know anything else. There's the stoner kid. There's the young struggling artist guy who just has too many romantic feelings and doesn't know what to do with himself. There's the goth woman who's dealing with all sorts of these feelings of, self-worth and self-doubt and kind of questioning the optimism and the happiness of all the people she sees around her. And it's funny because it's not that, these kids all work at the store and thus they all love each other. A lot of them really don't like each other. But there's that element of the store brings them together, and the store allows them to relate to each other in some really powerful ways.
Yeah.
And so let's go kind of story by story and talk about this main one, because in doing some deep dives around this movie, there's some really interesting theories about it. It does continue to, by the way, be beloved. Like, I know that you and I talk about the nostalgia factor for our own childhoods. For myself, this came out in 95, right when I was graduating college, and I was graduating high school, and I wound up not seeing it for a number of years. But by the time I was in my like mid-20s, I had a friend group where they were all my age, but mostly I was the one who dealt with people's problems. So I related to Joe probably more than anybody else, and unsurprisingly went to become a pastor a few years later. But it is very relatable to a lot of people. And one fun theory I've heard is Lucas supernatural in some way? Because, and as I want to ask sort of what you think about Lucas's journey, and I'll frame it though with this, because one of the things that happens through the course of the movie is that, you know, Lucas sets this plot in motion, that the end result of which is Joe does accept that he doesn't want to work for a this big boss who wants to sell out. He wants to own his own store. He wants to take that risk, but he's never really thought he could. And the events that Lucas sets off by losing all this money, you know, there's a big party at the end and they raise all the money and a lot more. None of it makes any sense, but it's a 90s movie, so you just go with it.
Yeah, they have like one of those big like plastic cheese ball jars, and they're like, and they specifically say that they need, I think it's $6,000 worth of cash, and that's full of cash, and they're like, it's $6,000, and I was like, it's $273. Like, are you kidding me? People were not putting $100 bills in that thing.
Also, somehow the amount that originally is supposed to just replace the 9,000 that should be in the registers but wasn't, now becomes that plus enough to be a down payment for Joe to buy the store himself.
No, Joe does say he actually did have the money, but he's not going to, because he has to pay back what Lucas stole. So that is covered.
Because $10,000 is a down payment for a major record store either way. That was kind of.
I mean, also the real estate. This thing is like 3 or 4 stories high, but it's only one big room, and there's like balconies.
There's balconies. There's this incredible view. And anyway, but the point being, and then towards the end, like when it's all kind of coming together, and everyone is in a better place, in part because of wisdom that Lucas has passed down to all of them. It is very weird, but very Lucas sort of way. And Joe realizes that he's going to get to live his dream. And he looks at Lucas and says, "You knew, didn't you?" And Lucas just kind of says, "Yeah." And so from this, there's been some idea that, like, is Lucas supposed to be a supernatural figure? Is he the representative of the music gods that did not make it work at the craps table, but actually did in fact make it work by throwing this whole thing into motion?
I mean, I suppose that's possible. I think Occam's razor would suggest that what Joe is saying is, you knew I didn't want to work for Music Town. I wanted to own the store or something along those lines, but I can't prove that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He might have a cape somewhere. We don't know. But okay, putting that theory aside, so what do you think of the Lucas Joe storyline?
You know, it's one of those things that it's like, it's overall great, except for that one moment. And I think you know what moment I'm thinking of that's really not okay.
I remember thinking that for the most part, this movie didn't have a lot of the kind of homophobic, transphobic humor that I tend to associate with movies from this time. But I feel like I saw one, because I watched it like 2 weeks ago. I feel like I saw one moment and was like, "Oh, I forgot how horrible that was," and then blanked it out. So remind me.
No, I mean, there's a couple of passing gay jokes. This is a movie from 1995, so like, but yeah, I mean, that's just gonna happen. There's the fact that Joe beats Lucas at one point. Like, he's his foster father, and it's really weird because like right at the very beginning of the day, everybody knows that Lucas did this. It's not a secret right away. And Joe is clearly furious, as he should be. And he lays out his dilemma really clearly, which is that if he tells anyone, if he calls the cops, if he tells his boss, the owner of the store, if he doesn't deposit the money in the bank, anything like that, Lucas is going to go to jail. And Lucas, as you mentioned, like, he was a foster kid, and he specifically says his mom gave him up for being a bad seed. So presumably he has a record, which makes his relationship with Warren really interesting. So if Joe calls the cops or in any way reports this, then Lucas is screwed. And he says if Lucas gets arrested, he's the one who's going to have to bail him out because Lucas doesn't have anybody else. And that's his savings. That's it. He's got to cover what Lucas stole and bail him out. The end.
And it should also be mentioned that all of the characters are older teenagers, where it is mentioned that two of them are in high school. One of them has an apartment of his own. My point being that all of them seem to be on whatever side of the line of 18 is most convenient for that moment. And so Lucas is not going to be tried as a child at this point in time.
No. The ages are pretty unclear because, Liv Tyler's definitely still in high school because she's not at Harvard yet.
Right.
But AJ talks about paying rent, and Deb mentions that she has no idea where her mother is, which would imply that she
is kind of on her own.
Also lives on her own.
But I think we don't want to think too much about AJ possibly being a lot older. I think he's supposed to be the same age, but maybe like a year older in school or something like that.
Yeah, well, because he's debating like going to art school. I think I think we can safely say she's probably a senior in high school and he graduated the previous year. Like, I think that's a safe bet. But, and then like, there's the question of like, is she underage, and like the whole Rex Manning thing, but we'll come back to that. But so Joe is furious with Lucas, and Lucas does not do anything to mitigate this. He's a complete little shit the entire day. And it's pretty far into the movie that Joe finally loses his temper, not at the theft, but at Lucas continuing to be a little shit. And he drags him into his office and shuts the door. And then all the other kids stand around wincing while we hear like violence and like the wall is shaking. And then the door opens, they come out. Joe hands Lucas a paper towel because he's bleeding and he has a bloody wound on his forehead for the entire rest of the movie. And he's like, you deserve that. And Lucas says, yeah. And like, other than that, their relationship is really great and fun and nuanced because it's so clear that like Joe is going to fall on his sword for Lucas because he loves him.
Right.
And Lucas did this incredibly stupid thing for Joe because he loves him. And then there's that weird moment. And for the record, younger viewers, this level of domestic abuse was not normal in 90s movies. More normal than it is today. Like, this was not par for the course.
See, and it's so interesting because I'll admit, I didn't have anything like that reaction to the scene. And
really,
I think part of it is that one of the things that the movie kind of plays with a bit, and I think intentionally, but like I said earlier, like I kind of wish that like more of the father-son relationship with Joe and Lucas was spelled out. I'm not a fan of violence in any circumstances. I'm but I think there are some times where I'm going to be my eyebrow is going to be a lot lower than it is higher. An employee of an independent business steals a significant amount of money from an employer, and the employer is like, I'm going to try and help you, but like you really screwed me over here. And the employee does nothing to help him. Instead is just like, spouting truisms or whatever. Do I think the employer should hit him in that situation? No. Is that employer going to go to the top of my villains list if he does? No. Adding the father-son dynamic, which I think maybe it's because I don't know if it's because like that really hasn't been spelled out by that point in the movie yet. And then so later viewings, it just didn't click for me in that same way. And the fact that it is kind of handled off screen. It's interesting. And because I think when you spell it out like that, especially when it is not just employer-employee, but also father-son.
Oh yeah, that makes it way worse.
Right. There definitely is some element of that. Although I do think that like, that sounds like I'm arguing the idea that it makes it much worse. I don't think it makes it much worse. I do think that some level of this kind of like a domestic abuse of a parent to a son is by no means like normalized in movies of the time. But I can think of other instances where things like this happened, especially in this kind of a setting of an older parental figure who's dealing with someone who has had a bad history of doing things. And it doesn't make it right. But also to me, I think part of why it didn't hit me that hard is it doesn't feel like that much out of character in that regard. Like part of what I'm thinking of is Gilmore Girls with Luke, I think was his name, and
Jess. Yeah.
And Jess. And I remember being like, I don't love the fact that I think he hits Jess a couple of times when Jess is being a complete and total idiot and putting him and others into legal danger. but I'm also like, I can understand it, that circumstance. Which again, I mean, you're just saying that like with today's sensibilities, I'm like, no, of course, that's never, ever, ever okay.
Well, and
I think that's just why like it didn't hit me in the same way, which is a terrible
and that's
metaphor.
the thing. Like the movie really presents it as this is part of their dynamic, and it's like it presents it as Lucas has had this coming, and everybody knows it, and he needed it, and like this is the correct action, and Joe deserved to work out some of his frustration. Like the movie presents it as the correct response,
Right.
which is part of why it's so fucked up. Like if it was played for this isn't cool, then it would by ironically be less disturbing to me.
Right.
But I also, and there's a few different ways that this comes up, but the movie there, I think there's a real disconnect in this movie. It draws a really direct line between coolness and morality that it is probably not that it really shouldn't.
Yeah, no, I hear that, and it's funny that I'm thinking about this too now, because yeah, again, it's very much a silly teen movie that has a romance at sort of the center of it, but it's very much just about everyone finding their own, personal growth. But there are a couple of other more direct acts of violence. And I think I think Joe is actually involved in them as well. And this one I think comes off understandably as much more justified. And we can get here a little bit into the Rex Manning of it all. So Rex Manning is supposed to be kind of a washed up pop star who had some big hits 10 years ago and now puts out stuff that is just very like that. I don't think auto-tune existed at that point, but it does not feel like it is written for the most, artistically minded of music necessarily. It's not like I love pop music, but it's definitely kind of aging pop star trying to hold on. Clearly treats all the people around him pretty badly. He's at this independent record store in part because he's probably not big enough of a star to go to the much bigger places. He treats his manager terribly. She winds up quitting on him. And in the kind of, big scene for Liv Tyler's character, Corey, she basically like she's had this dream of sleeping with him since she was a young girl. Before she probably even knew what that meant, but just this was her heartthrob. She insists on taking his lunch, goes in to take his lunch, and then starts stripping for him. And in what I think she thinks, because she's seen him as this like incredibly romantic singer character, is going to be this beautiful, like I think she's lit candles around the room, just this like wonderful her becoming a woman kind of moment. He clearly just treats her as yet another groupie, and just we don't see it, but like he unzips his pants, pulls out his junk, and is just like, okay, go to town. And she's deeply offended by this and upset about it. And she and there's been this tension building with her and Renee Zellweger's character, in part because they think that she explains why she couldn't go through with it. And it kind of comes out that there's been some tension already between them about Renee Zellweger worrying that, Corey sees her as a slut, and Corey thinking that like, what is Gina? That Gina is trying to push her into being more of like sexually active or more active with drinking or drugs or any of those things. And they're just,
I don't know that she even thinks that. I think she's just taking it out. She's taking out everything that happened with Rex and everything that happened with AJ on Gina. I don't think that it's necessarily justified in any way, which I'm not saying that to make her a bad guy. I think it's very, she feels so real in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. I think all of them do. And I think Gina, especially, because part of the point is that Corey comes from a much wealthier background. Corey's planning to go off to college, to Harvard probably. Gina is the person who just has never considered any of those possibilities. And Gina winds up going back into the store, and with her very much clearly being the aggressor, although again, she's a child and Rex Manning should know this, basically leads to a situation where the two of them are having sex in the storeroom. And when everyone else in the store figures that out, she walks out looking kind of disheveled. He walks out zipping up his pants. And if I'm right, I think AJ tackles him, and then does AJ punch him or does Joe punch him?
AJ tackles him. He punches AJ.
Right.
That's why
Okay.
AJ has a black eye for the rest of the movie.
That's right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. But AJ definitely like initiates a violent act towards him.
It's
And
pretty funny too, because if you're watching closely, like, I mean, look at the AJ, bless his heart. He's 90 pounds soaking wet, maybe 95 with that cardigan. He's flailing, like he doesn't even have fists made. He's like, I'm gonna fight you with the power of poetry. Like, what are you doing, kid?
He's such a little white knight, and it's just adorable. And like, and also in that moment though, it's not even like I don't think he even knows that this guy upset Corey. It's that
he does. Yeah, she said she threw herself at him. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So yeah. So and there's some extent to which like, is this from him anger at how he treated Corey? Is it anger at how he treated Gina? Is it anger at the fact that he now sees this guy as his rival to Corey? It's because he's a teenage boy and he's no idea what the hell he's feeling.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was interesting, like juxtaposing those two. Like, it's not this isn't a superhero movie. It's not a fight scene by any means, but that there is that moment of violence as well as the moment of violence between Joe and Lucas.
Yeah. And I mean, there's other, like, I don't think anybody else throws a punch, but there's other moments where like, shortly after that, when Corey has her meltdown, it takes 4 of the guys to carry her into the back room. She's like trashing the store. Right. And then Warren shows up with a gun, although it only has blanks in it, we find out. But like, there's definitely outbursts of violence throughout the movie. But yeah, the Joe and Lucas one is.
Yeah, no, it's fair. That's
because of the power dynamics underlying it. It doesn't feel random. It feels like this is a glimpse into a pattern that.
Yeah,
it's just a jarring note for me.
No, and that's fair. And I think it's very interesting. I think probably in part because for the most part I related to Joe, that it didn't click for me in that kind of a way. But yeah, it definitely puts a power on it.
Well, I'll fess up to my my part that I've been wrestling with, because I really don't think it's that bad, is the Rex. Okay, so the Rex Manning of it all. So there's a couple of things I want to unpack. You mentioned that Gina is a child. I don't know that we know she is.
Yeah,
we don't know if she's in high school or not. She's not one of the ones where we have any clues, really.
No, they specifically say that they're. I think they go to Gina goes to high school with her.
Oh, I didn't catch that. So she may be 17, which I think is probably the youngest that Corey could be. But I was thinking about the scene where Corey comes on to Rex, and later, I mean, the same thing happens with Gina coming on to Rex, and he's willing. Like, he does ask Corey. He says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And she says, "Yes." And he says, "How old are you?" And she says, "It doesn't matter, or old enough," or whatever it is she says. And that's when he takes his dick out. So he's like not really checking and not too concerned about it. But in his defense, and he's a sleazebag, don't get me wrong, but like, he made no overtures towards any of the young women working in the store. Yeah. Like, they were both the ones who came on to him. Now, that doesn't excuse him if they are underage, or even, I mean, I don't know.
I think this gets us into some much more difficult issues of like, I think it's important for society to have lines. I don't think there's something magical that happens the day you turn 18 that means that everything before then was a childlike act of innocence, and everything after that is, I think it is entirely possible for a person to take advantage of a 20-year-old in a way that a 17-year-old might be a little more savvy about. Like,
I mean, even here, I think if Gina is 17 in this scene, I don't think she's fucked up by sleeping with Rex Manning. I think what's upsetting to her is the reaction of everybody else. Sleeping with Rex Manning means nothing to her. Right. Whereas for Corey, even if she is 18, this was an extremely upsetting incident for her. Yeah. So 100%. A birthday is not magic.
And I think part of, it's funny. Like, I appreciate you saying that, because I remember the first time I watched it, I was an idiot. I didn't really understand these things. And part of me was like, isn't that what Corey wanted? I don't get what the big deal is. And I later came to very much understand, of course, because it's that she had this one idea of she wanted to make love to Rex, and Rex was like, "Oh, you're a groupie. You want to suck me off," and and for me, I think the thing. It feels very much like, and this is something I want you to talk about, Sam, not to put you on the spot, but you have at least a little more experience of being a teenage girl in high school than I do. It feels like for Gina to do that with Rex, totally absent everything else, yeah, I think fine. And I think for Rex, like, I think you're kind of sleazy, but like, whatever. She's clearly the one coming on to him in many ways. And if she's over 18, sure. But still sleazy as hell, but not like, oh my God, you're the worst of the worst. To me, though, like what she's doing, it has nothing to do with Rex in that moment. It is very much about, she believes that Corey thinks she's better than her, and I think with some justification. And this is I'm going to go get what Corey couldn't have, what Corey was afraid to. Just
it's so revenge on Corey. Yeah, because Corey hurt her feelings.
Right.
100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, like I keep saying it, but like Corey and Gina and Deb, I think all the female characters in this or the girls, Jane is not really a character, but she's a character who feels like there was a lot of her left on the cutting room floor. But the three teenage girls are possibly but they're probably teenagers. Feel very, very real, and they're the way they all interact with each other feels very, very real. But the other thing about Rex Manning, and like I absolutely was a teenage girl. Like I was a teenage girl who was obsessed with pop stars. I was a diehard Backstreet Boys fan. I was like crazy, like documentaries of Beatlemania Backstreet Boys fan. Like there's footage of me that has aired on MTV. Like I once chased them through Times Square, like physically. It was crazy. So yeah, like you said, you relate to Joe. Like I big time relate to Corey. I was a little goody two shoes, A+ student who is in love with a pop star who has since turned out to be kind of a turd. And a couple of the Backstreet Boys have turned out to be not great. Nick Carter was not the one that I was in love with, but there are quite a number of assault allegations against him on his Wikipedia page. So, but I know that feeling. Like I know what it's like to be that girl. But I also, and I mentioned before that the movie really conflates coolness and morality. And I think it's noteworthy that Rex is sleazy and he's very clearly contemptuous of his fans. And he's like an egomaniac, and he's occasionally a diva. Like when he's like, I don't like that chair, I want a different chair. Yeah. But he doesn't actually do anything terrible. Like he's played very much, he and Mitchell, who's the store owner, are both played as the villains of the movie because they're losers, according to the coolness ethos of the movie, and not because of any of their actions. And one thing that it always sort of runs in the back of my mind when I watch Empire Records, as much as I enjoy it and as cool as I think these kids are, is that they would all hate me because of my taste in music. And there's a very consistent, like, you are only a good person if you like rock and alternative, and that's it. And like, if you like pop music in particular, pop music that appeals to women, and there's like one or two visibly gay guys in the crowd who are pulled out for a little bit of mocking, they are so ridiculous that even the pop star who makes the music thinks that they're pathetic and is barely able not to be contemptuous to their faces. And it's really mean-spirited.
I mean, in many ways, God, of course I knew this was going to happen, but this is a good conversation to have. But yeah, it's about like pulling some of this apart. And, at that age, I would never listen. I would never deign to listen to something that had been recorded in my lifetime, with the exception of like, artsy folk music. Like I was listening to all like, Bob Dylan and Tom Waits and stuff like that. Since
God,
then,
you really
like,
are, Joe.
I really was in a lot of ways. Now I'm a huge like Sabrina Carpenter and here's the thing. In the 90s also, I kind of loved Backstreet Boys, but I would never ever admit it to anybody.
They were
Today
great.
I'll happily do their karaoke anytime. And I love One Direction and like a lot of these things. And but yeah, like I think you're very right. And I think it's that Joe never grew up. And like
Yeah.
I think in funny ways, it's funny that Rexy is very much portrayed as the villain. For some, I think very justifiable, and some that are kind of like ways. And I think I love though. I think he has one of the best lines in the movie, and it says so much about his character that his insult to everyone, and he's like, going away. His last line is, "Why don't you all just fade away?" It's just such this idea of like, to him, like losing fame is the only thing that matters.
Yeah. And like he's a great character, and like I have to check the actor, Maxwell Caulfield does an amazing job. Like he portrays that really specific character so beautifully. And you watch him and you do loathe him. But when you think about what he actually does, he's not actually that bad. And it's the same. I think it's the same as like the Joe and Lucas beating scene where you're like, the movie is so compelling that you're sort of rolling with what it's put forward as like, this is right and this is wrong. But the music thing in particular really struck me. I mean, everything with Rex Manning, but also there's a bit where Lucas is going through the CDs that Warren was shoplifting, and he's like, rap, metal, Whitney Houston. Like, you have terrible taste. If you're going to steal, you should steal good music, and I'm ashamed it took me this long, was when I went, there's no Black people in this movie.
Yeah, I was going to point out earlier that when we were talking about all the kind of music we got into, there's no hip hop, there's no rap, because it's an all white kids movie.
It's an all white kids movie.
Doesn't make it stand out for a 90s movie like this, but especially a movie that's about music in a place that's supposed to be pretty darn close. There's not in like rural Tennessee. I mean, even there, probably not wouldn't make sense either. But here, like, there's a lot of music that's very inspired by non-white artists, and they're not talking about it at all.
No, and they talk about it once, to write off the only mentions of music by Black people as bad. Yeah, it's just and rap and metal are like bundled together as these are violent and we don't need to think about them anymore. And then Whitney Houston is laughable, which, excuse you, she's one of the greatest vocal artists to ever live. But we know Lucas has poor judgment.
Pop artists you could have picked, but Whitney Houston especially seems like it's funny. I definitely picked up on the rap thing, and I made that a note of that as one of the things I wanted to ask about, but I hadn't picked up on heard that it was Whitney Houston. But yeah, that just kind of adds to the oddness of that.
Like, put some respect on her name.
Seriously.
I'm sorry. I know your soundtrack has Toad the Wet Sprocket, who will live forever, but
I have to say that was one of my like objections to like the modern music of that time. I remember doing this thing about like, and we had computers that were pretty impressive, but the internet was still pretty darn new at that point. But you could have like a random word generator, and when there was like, it was Toad the Wet Sprocket and Temple of the Dog were the two I think I made fun of the most, but where it just felt like you'd fed a bunch of things into a random word generator and spat them out.
Yeah.
The Lemonheads might have been a perfectly good band, and it's not their fault. But someone once came up to me and said, "Have you heard this amazing new song called Sound of Silence by the Lemonheads?" And
that's a candy.
What?
Lemonheads, it's a candy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not objecting to the band name. I'm just saying it's another,
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. The soundtrack slaps. Like, the music, but the movie very explicitly posits that only the music in this movie is great. And if the music is not in this movie, then it is categorically bad. Except, I guess, Lucas says jazz is okay.
Yeah. So let's talk then about, it's not really a rom-com, but it has like it feels like a rom-com where they started writing the background characters and they just loved those characters so much they kept writing them. But it does have your pretty basic kind of a rom-com plot of the girl is so obsessed with someone else that she doesn't see how wonderful the guy in front of her is. The guy in front of her doesn't think he's good enough for her. She's going to go off to a great college. They don't know what's going to happen. And of course it all works out wonderfully because she says, no, you're right, I love you. And he gets over his feelings about the Rex Manning thing. She says she's going to go to Harvard, and he says, I'm going to go to art school in Boston somewhere. How do we feel about how the love story turned out?
I think it works because of how little time it has. And if they had spent any more time on it, they would have needed to put a lot more work into it. And it also works because those two are serving up 90s hotness so hard that you don't care. You don't care. Like AJ, the Johnny Whitworth is the absolute platonic ideal of what a cute boy looked like in the mid 90s. Like it's like they made him in a lab.
Yeah.
It's absurd. Like the center parted, shiny, soft hair that he's constantly running his fingers through, and the plaid and the like.
If you think about like 90s boys archetypes, after Jordan Catalano has broken your heart, you go to AJ, who will make it better again.
Like, exactly. He looks like I know Ryder Strong did have an older brother in Boy Meets World, but he looks like Ryder Strong's older brother. Like it absolute peak cute boy. And it's not just the actual like physical look and the costuming, but the fact that he is like a sensitive artist who all he does is stand in the background and make deadpan jokes and pine after a girl, which of course was the hottest thing you could possibly do as a boy in the 90s. And then Liv Tyler with the little plaid skirt and the cropped mohair sweater, and again the perfect hair, and like just I don't care what they say or do. I just want to watch the two of them be in Adelia's catalog together.
Well, and I was always much more for the bad girl than the good girl. So Renee Zellweger was the one I was obsessed with from that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think it's interesting how you just described the outfit, and it says a lot about the 90s. Corey is the good girl, and her outfit says that. And Renee Zellweger is the slut, the bad girl. And again, I'm saying like the moral judgment of the times of the movie is very much not mine. I'm just saying what it is.
Yeah.
With the exception of when she puts on the record store outfit, Liv Tyler is showing more skin than Renee Zellweger for most of the movie.
Oh yeah, that skirt is not any longer.
And again, I don't think that has any judgment whatsoever on someone's sexuality or promiscuousness or anything like that, none of which are bad to begin with. But it is just it's a very funny statement of 90s, like what read as preppy good girl and what read as girl from the wrong side of the tracks.
Well, it's pastel, but also I think one of the best moments of comedy in the movie is when she's seducing Rex and she takes off her sweater and she has that like sexy red lace bra, and then she slowly unhooks her skirt and she drops it, and it's just these white cotton panties, and the contrast between the two is so funny and it's so adorable. Like there's so much character in that, especially later when she's talking with Gina and she takes the bra out without taking the sweater off and hands it to her because it's Gina's bra that she borrowed. Like it's just, the movie communicates so much so well with so little, and there's so much character in that, and there's so much of their friendship in that. But it's also very, very funny.
Yeah. No, it really is. And I think it is a great character study of all these different people. And I think you're right. I found it a little bit later, but when talking to a lot of my friends about it, what people would often say is like, you'd go to slumber parties or things like that, and people would always talk about like, well, this one's my favorite, and this one's my favorite, and like give you some idea of, who different people were in the movie and things like that, because, it really captures so much of the, teenage girls figuring out their sexuality, teenage boys figuring out like, what does it mean to have strong feelings, and when is it appropriate to talk about that? Like, I feel like the AJ scene is painful, and I feel like the movie's a little more sympathetic to him than I might necessarily want it to be. But the idea that he is so focused on telling her what he feels about her that he has absolutely zero awareness of what she is going through that moment, you know.
Yeah.
And because the idea that like actually a big part of love is seeing the other person, you know.
Yeah.
And like I remember, but I also like, and I can now, you know, almost 50 and married for many years, sit back and judge that and completely remember that, you know, like once you've decided what you want to do with the rest of your life, you're going to do it right now. And
Yeah.
I probably declared my love to more than one person at the worst possible time, because in my mind, I loved them. And so anything else, you know, didn't like, what do you mean notice what they're feeling? They're going to hear that I love them. And
Yeah.
you mentioned he's kind of throwaway character. I think you're definitely right. But I'll also say that like, as someone who was a goth for many years and did spend time dating people who were going through a lot of mental health challenges that I didn't understand and wanted to help, because that's what I was taught to do as a good white knight boy, was save the women around me who were upset. Burke, I want to say Burkhart. I think it's just Burke, right? Or something like that.
It's Burko.
Burko, thank you. His feeling of like wanting to help Deb, not knowing how, and her then saying like, don't worry, it's not your fault. It's not anything you did. You know, the implication I think is that they had some kind of a fight, but that's not really what upset her more than anything, you know, and caused her to try to unalive herself. But like his helplessness, but again, also his stupidity, because he probably did do something stupid to her and he doesn't know it, were things that I'm judgmental of, but I also very much related to.
It's interesting that you read that as they had some kind of a fight, because I was wondering, and we don't know, this is not, I don't think there's any indication one way or another that like, we really don't know what happened, but I got the impression, or I guess jumped to the conclusion that it was something sexual. Like they had sex that upset her. Like we don't know anything more than that. Like maybe he pressured her into it. Maybe what they like, they were already having sex, but what they specifically did was upsetting her. Maybe it wasn't anything that he did, but she is obviously going through it. Like,
right.
And again, we don't know. Like, they could have just had a fight. Like, we have no idea. It also, again, that character, we don't know anything about him. He does come off as older than the others, which I think he probably was, because apparently the actor was Liv Tyler's stepfather at the time, which is weird.
Which Liv Tyler already has been the super sexy girl in a number of Aerosmith videos. Her last name being Tyler because Steve Tyler, the lead singer of Aerosmith, was her father, which Steven Tyler didn't know when they were filming those.
He didn't?
No. That's my theory. There's just all sorts of craziness around this family.
I feel a little bit better about those videos now that
I remember like reading that and a lot of my, you know, because those videos came out a couple years earlier, and I will say it had an effect on middle school, high school boys of my age.
Oh, they are so hot. Like the Crazy video with Alicia Silverstone when they go when they're at the strip club. Oh, yeah. Not just the teenage boys. Trust.
There we go.
The teenagers of all genders.
We remember those movies, those videos. But yeah, no, I don't know all the stuff in the Tyler family. I don't understand it, and if commentators know more than I do,
they do either.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I there's a lot of creepy things about him. I love that song at the end so much, and it's
great.
It is a wonderful moment and I will say, it was Renee Zellweger, I think, is now probably of all of them, I think, gone on to have the biggest career. Like Liv Tyler did the Lord of the Rings movies and some other things, but Renee Zellweger with like Bridget Jones' Diary and all that,
unquestionably,
and it's just had an incredible career. And again, if you want to talk about like acting in the smallest ways, they're on the roof, and it's kind of the like, we're playing a big song because it's a big party. It could be a complete throwaway moment, but it winds up being this huge character moment for her, because at the start of the song, she is just kind of like the backup singer singing the vocals of the chorus. And then after a guitar solo, Burko was like, no, you take the mic now. And she's clearly nervous. And the first line she messes up a little bit, which for me, I remember the first times I performed in coffee houses or in bands and stuff, and I really, and then like as she's singing, her hands are kind of flapping around her like little birds, and then you see by the end of the verse she's become confident, and then just flips into being so happy and proud of herself and bouncing all over, and it's just, in many ways, to me, that's the moral heart. Like and yes, it's because also I had a huge crush on the actress, but like to me, that story is so much the moral heart of the movie, and such a beautiful, and that the role that song does in telling so much of that, I think is just so incredible.
Well, and that's the thing that, like, I mean, I joked about it before, like that. Can you imagine what it must be like to try to shop at Empire Records? Like, it's a nightmare. You go in there, there's nobody working the register. You try to buy a CD or a cassette, I do think it's charming that this movie was made during transitional time in music. So you see people with vinyls and cassettes and CDs, but you try to buy your CD and the employee tells you it sucks and you shouldn't buy it. You walk past the listening booths, people are having sex in there. There's a 14-year-old kid waving a gun around. There's somebody gluing quarters to the floor. Like there's some pothead jumping on the furniture.
And in one of the weird, like there's this whole, we haven't even talked about it and we need to go in a second, but there's this whole like damn the man attitude towards the movie. But it's funny because the one where they say damn the man up the Empire, because like it's Empire Records. I think again that's because it's probably outside New York City.
Yeah.
But like the Empire is not only what you think of as like damn the man, but there's a scene where when Warren steals something, Lucas demonstrates that he's very good at chasing down shoplifters, and that he knows exactly how to do it. And there's a fun chase scene through it. And Renee Zellweger, Gina, she gets on the mic and is like, "Hey, everybody, we're about to catch a shoplifter and we're going to deep fat fry him and feed him up to you." And if you buy into the idea that the store is awesome and the store is good and therefore nothing should harm the store, it makes sense. You also step back and you're like, wait a minute, this is so cop. Like we're like coming down on the shoplifter here. And I get it.
No, I don't think that's cop behavior. You're allowed to protect what's yours.
I get you. I'm being intentionally hyperbolic given our previous conversations.
That's true. And this made me think of that, like that, because that was also like, are we calling somebody a cop because they are a cop, or are we calling somebody a cop because they're not cool?
Right. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, like you're in there, you're like, I just want to buy this Ace of Base album, please. Please.
Well, do you know what has happened with Ace of Base?
No.
They're straight up Nazis.
Oh, well, never mind. I don't want it anymore. I want to buy Jagged Little Pill.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely a much better one. Yeah. No, Ace of Base was a band that I was very into in middle school. The Swedish pop star, them and Roxette. And then later learned that Ace of Base apparently was big old Swedish Nazis. So
well, no, thank you.
Roxette forever then.
Yeah. But yeah, you're like trying to buy your CD and you're in the middle of like performance art all of a sudden, or there's everybody has to dance now to whatever song they just put on. And you're like, I just want to go. But all of this is to say, like, the movie does such a good job of catching you up in that and saying like, yes, this is absurd. Like, yes, a lot of the things these people are doing are not good customer service or antisocial, or like, this is not something, none of this would be permitted in a massive chain store, which is like made very clear that they would not be allowed to be themselves in a chain store. But if you just want to go and really, really love music and have a found family, then Empire Records is your home. And like the final scene and that song do such a good job of selling that, even though the movie at no point has really made it clear that it would be bad to be bought by Music Town. Like, they haven't made a case for why Music Town is bad or why Mitchell is bad. Except that it's the man. But it doesn't matter because you feel that found family and that quirkiness and that love of music.
And I just want to say a quick thing about the damn the man thing, and in closing, and then we can wrap up. And after you respond, of course. For me, it's. I'm going to sound like, you young kids today, you don't understand. Today, I think we're all like, we are deep in late stage capitalism. Everything's falling down around us. Like Gen X and then millennials, I think, really was, when the idea of the capitalist dream of you're going to work, you're going to go to school, you're going to get a college, you're going to get a degree, you're going to get a good job and buy a home and have a family and live a life even better than the generation that came before you. And the next generation will live even better than you. That was when it really started to fall apart. And we really started to see like, maybe this doesn't actually make sense. And in some ways that had started much earlier, The Graduate questions this in many ways from the 70s, but especially like so much of 90s culture to me, and thus millennial culture, is about, wait a minute, I don't want to just go have a 40-hour work week. I don't want to just go and be part of, the 90s. I think is also when like the expansion of chains really becomes, gets kicked into high gear, and local Italian restaurants start getting replaced by Olive Garden and stuff like that. And so I think there really was this strong, like, independent business, independent music, damn the man kind of ethos that is very much a part of the time. And it doesn't make any sense. They never explain any of it because it's just there. But I feel like, to me, I think I love the movie, not because this movie taught me to damn the man, but because it spoke to all of that was in the zeitgeist at the time, that we look back now and are like, what the hell is this movie doing?
Yeah, I'm going to push back on one thing there. I don't think this is millennials. I think this is squarely Gen X. This is
fair.
and there's actually a really clear divide there. This movie is Gen X. Like I'm an older millennial. I saw this movie in high school. I not when it came out, but I eventually watched it when I was in high school. I love this movie. And like I said, I'm nostalgic about this time period, but I was a little kid. I was, in elementary, middle school when this movie came out. But everything about the aesthetics, but also the ethos of selling out is bad because selling out is bad. We don't need to explain it. Just by definition, selling out is bad is a Gen X specific. It's not that other generations haven't expressed that, but it is a very powerful Gen X theme. You see it in things like Reality Bites, Rent. It's a huge theme in Rent. And with Reality Bites, they actually later tested it. They did audience testing with millennials, and millennials all thought she picked the wrong guy because you have the guy who doesn't sell out but is an asshole, and the guy who does sell out but is nice. And they were like, she should go with the one who's nice to her. Millennials actually often do not respond well to that. Whatever you do, don't sell out. What happened with millennials was that they did buy into, okay, like we can, participate in the economy and succeed and grow and whatever. And then 2008 happened, and we learned that was a lie. So Gen X had much more of the support and rejected it from a place of support, and millennials embraced it and then were dropped on our asses. Which is not to say that every Gen X person has done wonderfully and every millennial has done terribly, but that was sort of, so there is kind of that generational split there. And this movie exudes Gen X so powerfully, which is not a bad thing. I find it very charming, but
no, that makes sense. And certainly it's made in 1995. So I was 18 in 95 and I was born in 77, which is the tail end of Gen X, but millennial doesn't start till 83. So all the kids in this movie are Gen X, to be very clear. I think, and I think you're right. I think there was definitely a good deal of economic challenge that was facing Gen X, but it also was more, you're right. It was a lot of also, wait, I have the privilege, but this feels soulless. Why is this the thing that we're supposed to all have worked so hard for? So you're correct. There definitely is a break there. And I appreciate you pointing that one out. Any last comments you want to make? Any things we didn't hit, or great lines you wanted to mention, or just plot lines to discuss?
I just wish we were recording this on April 8th, Rex Manning Day.
Yeah, no, I just came about it late. It was honestly, it was because the clip of the song that they sing at the end is called Sugar High. I think it's by Burko, and it's like the only thing he's done, but it's on, if you Google Sugar High Empire Records on YouTube, you'll find that clip, and it is just so charming. And I watched that, and it got me to watch the whole movie, and I was like, okay, I need to talk to someone about it. Jessica's the perfect one. So I'm so glad we get to have this talk. I'm so glad that we both ruined the movie a little bit more for each other, but we both still enjoyed it a lot. And I hopefully everyone else. I hope you get to enjoy the movie. If you haven't already, send us your thoughts. If this was a big part of your childhood or your young adulthood or your teenhood or any of that, let us know what you think. More importantly, more than anything else, damn the man.
Save the Empire.
Save the Empire.